They often say Lady Mary Crawley was cold, distant, and even proud. But those who truly watched her life at Downton Abbey know another truth. Behind the sharp words and graceful posture was a woman who loved deeply, especially when it came to family. The most powerful proof of this? The way she stood by Matthew Crawley during his darkest hours. When Matthew Crawley suffered his terrible accident and lost the use of his legs, his entire world seemed to fall apart. He was a man full of energy, of hope, of responsibility, and suddenly he felt trapped in a body that no longer obeyed him. For Matthew, it was not only about walking again, it was about losing the sense of who he was. And in those moments, when he doubted his worth and even pushed others away, Lady Mary showed a side of herself that few people expected. Mary was not always known for being openly affectionate. She guarded her heart, spoke her mind, and carried herself with the pride of someone who had been raised to protect her family's name. Yet when Matthew was at his weakest, she became his strength. She sat by his side, she listened to his despair, and most importantly, she reminded him that he was still the man she loved. In the world of Downton Abbey, where appearances meant everything, Mary did not care about how others saw him. She saw only Matthew. It was a kindness that went beyond simple words. Mary offered him loyalty when he felt broken, and she gave him hope when he could not see it for himself. Even when Matthew believed that he could no longer be her equal, Mary never turned away. Her love was not about perfection, it was about standing firm when life was at its hardest. That devotion, quiet and unwavering, revealed a Mary that was far more human than her critics ever gave her credit for. This moment, more than many others, showed us that Lady Mary's love was not a fleeting emotion, but a choice she made with strength. She chose to stay, to believe in Matthew, and to give him a reason to fight for the life ahead. It is in this choice, this act of devotion, that we discover one of Lady Mary's kindest and most powerful qualities. Matthew's injury did more than rob him of his physical strength, it left him convinced that his life as a man, as a partner, and even as an heir to Downton was over. In that world, appearances mattered greatly, and he could not imagine himself as anything but a burden. He withdrew, not only from the estate but also from Mary. And this is where Mary's devotion became more than a romantic gesture, it became an act of courage. Instead of protecting her reputation or searching for an easier path, Mary leaned into the storm. She saw Matthew's pain, but she also saw beyond it. For Mary, his worth was never tied to his ability to walk or to fulfill duties at the estate. It was tied to who he was, honorable, kind, and loyal. When Matthew tried to push her away, insisting she should find someone else, Mary refused. Her love was not about convenience, it was about commitment. This was a turning point for her character. We had seen Mary be sharp and even selfish at times, but here, her compassion took center stage. She showed a softer strength, one that wasn't about controlling a household or winning arguments, but about patience and quiet reassurance. Even when he doubted his place in her life, Mary chose to stay, proving that real devotion is not about celebrating someone's best days, but standing beside them on their worst. What makes this moment unforgettable is how it redefined Mary's own journey. Up until then, many saw her as a woman driven by pride and duty, someone who might choose security over love. But her loyalty to Matthew silenced those doubts. She was willing to sacrifice her own comfort, even her future prospects, to ensure that he did not face despair alone. That kind of devotion was rare in the world of Downton Abbey, where alliances were often built on convenience and advantage. By choosing Matthew again and again, Mary revealed that kindness can take the form of persistence. It doesn't always shout or dazzle, it quietly refuses to give up on someone, no matter how impossible the road ahead may seem. In that devotion, Mary's heart spoke louder than her sharpest words ever could. When Matthew began to believe his life had no value, Mary faced a choice that would have terrified many women of her time. She could have walked away quietly, protecting herself from heartbreak and securing a safer future. No one would have judged her for leaving. But Mary stayed, and in doing so, she showed us something rare, that love, when grounded in loyalty, is not weakness at all, but strength. Mary was a woman born into a world where appearances ruled everything. A match was supposed to be about wealth, reputation, and the continuation of family lines. By those rules, Matthew, paralyzed and consumed by doubt, was no longer a desirable choice. Yet Mary defied those unspoken rules. She chose not the man that society told her to love, but the man her heart had already chosen. This was not the icy Mary so many people imagined. It was Mary at her bravest. Her devotion to Matthew in those moments revealed something deeper about her character. She was willing to carry his pain as if it were her own. She offered not pity, but partnership. When Matthew insisted that his injury made him unworthy, Mary's actions answered him without hesitation. She reminded him, in word and in presence, that his spirit mattered more than his body, that his love, even in brokenness, was still the love she wanted above all else. What makes this devotion unique is how it reshaped Mary's identity. Before, she was seen as a woman who protected her heart with walls of pride. But standing by Matthew forced her to lower those walls. In the silence of his despair, she found the courage to let kindness guide her choices rather than fear of judgment. Her love was no longer just about romance. It became an anchor, steady and unyielding, proving that sometimes the kindest act is simply not leaving when it would be easier to go. Mary's loyalty to Matthew during his suffering reminds us that true kindness is not always gentle or sweet. Sometimes it is strong, stubborn, and even defiant. In loving him fully, without condition, Mary revealed that her sharpness and her tenderness were not opposites, they were two halves of the same strength. And through that strength, she gave Matthew more than comfort. She gave him a reason to believe in life again. What makes Mary's devotion to Matthew unforgettable is not only that she stood by him in his weakest moments, it's that her faith in him eventually helped change the outcome of his story. Matthew had resigned himself to a life in the shadows, certain that he would never walk again, never build a family, never claim the role that fate had placed in his hands. He believed the chapter of his life had closed. But Mary refused to let that be the ending. Her love was steady, her loyalty unshaken, and that persistence mattered. Even when Matthew's voice trembled with hopelessness, Mary's presence reminded him that his life still had meaning. She gave him the courage to fight against despair, to face each day with the thought that someone believed in him more than he believed in himself. This was not grand or dramatic, it was the quiet kind of devotion that heals. And then came the turning point. When Matthew's recovery began, it wasn't only a medical triumph, it was the reward of never having been abandoned. Mary's refusal to give up on him had carried him through the darkness, and together they stepped into a future brighter than either of them could have imagined during those bleak days. Their eventual marriage was not just a romantic victory. It was living proof that devotion, kindness, and patience can rebuild a life that seemed shattered. But here's what makes this devotion unique. It wasn't only Matthew who was transformed, it was Mary too. In learning to love him through pain, she became softer yet stronger, braver yet more vulnerable. She discovered that kindness doesn't weaken her pride, it strengthens her humanity. Her devotion to Matthew gave her a new sense of purpose, to protect not only the Crawley name but the people she loved most fiercely. This part of Mary's story is what makes her such a fascinating character. She's not remembered for easy smiles or gentle manners. She's remembered because when love demanded sacrifice, she chose to stand firm. Her devotion to Matthew turned despair into hope, weakness into strength, and silence into one of the most powerful love stories Downton Abbey ever told. For Lady Mary, motherhood was never about endless displays of softness or constant words of comfort. Her son, George, never had the kind of mother who hovered over him or shielded him from every scrape. Instead, he had a mother whose love was steady, fierce, and sometimes almost hidden, yet always there. Mary's kindest moments as a mother often appeared in the quiet details: the way she looked at him, the way she spoke of him, the way she made choices to ensure his future was secure, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. What made Mary's motherly love unique was that it did not fit the expected mold of Downton Abbey society. She was not the picture of a doting mother constantly in the nursery. Rather, She carried her motherhood into every decision she made about the estate and the Crawley family. For Mary, George's well-being was tied to Downton's survival, and she shouldered that burden with a kind of unspoken devotion, while others might have called it pride or ambition. For Mary, it was love expressed through responsibility, yet in moments when the mask slipped, we caught glimpses of a softer Mary, the Mary who smiled when she held George close, the Mary whose voice lowered when she spoke to him, the Mary who carried both her grief for Matthew and her determination to give their son a bright future. It was in those rare, unguarded moments that her motherly warmth shone through, proving that even someone as reserved as Mary could be profoundly tender when it mattered most. What makes this warmth even more striking is that it came from loss. Having loved and lost Matthew so suddenly, Mary understood how fragile life could be. That loss made her love for George all the more urgent and all the more protective. She knew that in him lived a piece of Matthew, and through him, the future of Downton. Her devotion to her son was never loud, never boastful, but it was unshakable, rooted in love, grief, and the fierce determination to carry on. This is why Mary's motherhood is one of her kindest legacies. It was not about what she said, but about what she did. It was about making hard decisions, carrying heavy responsibilities, and still finding moments to show affection. Her love for George was both gentle and unyielding, a reminder that kindness comes in many forms. And sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one that protects quietly but fiercely, every single day. For Lady Mary, being George's mother was never only about rocking him to sleep or watching him grow in the nursery. From the very beginning, her motherhood was intertwined with duty. She carried the Crawley name, the estate, and the expectations of her family on her shoulders. Yet within that burden, she found ways to show George the kind of motherly love that was uniquely hers. Unlike women who could afford to separate the roles of mother and mistress of the estate, Mary had to merge the two. She could not always spend her days in George's company, but her presence in his life was felt in a different way through every decision she made for his future. Each time she fought to protect Downton, each time she stood firm against change or challenge, she was also protecting the world her son would one day inherit. That was her version of maternal devotion, not only loving him, but ensuring that his life would be secure, proud, and worthy of his father's name. But even within this weight of duty, glimpses of tenderness broke through. When Mary spoke of George, her voice often softened in a way it rarely did with anyone else. The hardness of her pride seemed to melt into something warmer, something that reminded us of the young woman who had once risked everything for love. With George, she was still Lady Mary, the poised, sharp, and commanding Crawley daughter, but she was also simply a mother, willing to let her heart show for just one person without restraint. This balance between tenderness and duty is what makes her motherhood so unique. She did not wear her love on her sleeve, and yet it was there, in every sacrifice and every plan. It was a love that taught George strength as much as comfort, resilience as much as kindness. For Mary, kindness was never only about soothing, it was about preparing, guiding, and protecting. And in that balance, she created a different kind of warmth, one that shaped not only her son but also the legacy of Downton itself. Mary's story reminds us that kindness can look different from what we expect. It does not always come with open arms and gentle words. Sometimes it comes with decisions made in silence, with strength carried on behalf of someone too young to carry it themselves. In that way, Mary's motherly warmth was not just private affection, it was also public duty, tied together in one powerful, unforgettable devotion. Lady Mary Crawley was never the easiest character to love. Her wit could cut like glass, her pride often stood taller than her compassion, and her decisions sometimes left others wounded. But when we look closer past the sharpness and the guarded walls, we find something else. A woman whose kindness ran deep. But quietly, her devotion to Matthew Crawley showed us that true love is not about perfection or ease, but about staying when everything seems broken. She chose him not because the world approved, but because her heart demanded it. That loyalty turned despair into hope and carved out one of Downton's most moving love stories. Her warmth as a mother revealed a different side of her heart. Not the overprotective sweetness of storybooks, but a fierce, steady devotion that shaped every choice she made. In George, she saw both her past and her future, and she carried that responsibility with courage. Her love was never loud, but it was constant, unshakable, and as enduring as Downton itself. Mary's kindness may not have been the kind that draws applause in every room. It was the kind found in private sacrifices, in loyalty that refused to falter, and in strength that carried others when they could not carry themselves. That is why her story still resonates, because it reminds us that kindness does not have to be soft to be real. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is simply to stay, to endure, and to love without conditions. So when we remember Lady Mary Crawley, we remember more than her sharp words or elegant presence. We remember a woman who taught us that kindness wears many faces, sometimes tender, sometimes fierce, always unforgettable. And now, the question is yours. Which of Lady Mary's kindest moments touched you the most?